Hey guys, Probable1701 here, and today we are going to be talking about Genesis of the Daleks and why it is essential to Doctor Who and why it's one of the most important stories in all of Doctor Who, but especially for the Daleks. Recently I did an It's Armageddon. I'm doing a series ranking, not ranking, but talking about each Doctor's top 5 stories you would save if Armageddon was happening. And when I did the 4th Doctors, naturally most people had Genesis on their list in the comments, but there were a few people who didn't. And I remember somebody in the comments saying, they were all about other people having their opinions and everything was objective. And then they said, that being said, if you don't have Genesis on your list, you're just wrong. And I had to agree with it. And this doesn't happen with very many stories or very many Doctors where I think you have to have a story on a list. But considering the Armageddon series is meant to be very objective based, because you are picking, whatever the It's Armageddon is about, is what you're picking to save for posterity, for future generations. It's all they'll ever get of whatever that particular topic is. And I think when you're looking at Tom Baker's era objectively, and you can only pick 5 stories, I think you have to have Genesis on there. I just think you do. It's so important to the 4th Doctor. It's so important to the Daleks. It's so important to Doctor Who as a whole that I think it's not very often I would argue that with somebody. Excuse me. But I do think in this case, Genesis of the Daleks has to be on that list. So the occasion when I was seeing it not on the list of people's comments, I found it a bit baffling. I think some people were, don't get me wrong, Doctor Who is such a big franchise. It's been around for so long. It's got so many different eras, and so many people have come on board at different times that no matter how objective you try to be, there's going to be some subjective bias in there. I mean, if you're a Doctor Who fan, you're going to have some kind of subjective bias that's going to, whether consciously or subconsciously, it's going to somehow sway your thoughts, even on your objective opinion. I think anyone who's been a Doctor Who fan long enough to really be a Doctor Who fan is never going to be able to be 100% completely objective. But I do think you have to have Genesis on there. Genesis, one, it's a well-written story. Great introduction to Davros. I absolutely love Davros. I think Davros is at his best here. I think Michael Wisher is the best Davros. I mean, we have this character who has obviously been through traumatic experience. I mean, he's very physically deformed. Something happened to him. I mean, he's lost his eyes until they retcon that. But he's lost his eyes, his legs. He's only got one hand. I mean, he looks grotesque. And obviously it has mentally affected him as well. Because like so many villainous geniuses, he's also a megalomaniac. He's got a heck of an ego. And you learn over the course of the story just how crazy this man is. And my goodness, him and Tom Baker's 4th Doctor interact so well together in this story. Anytime they are having conversations, it is just Doctor Who gold. The scene, of course, that famous scene when the Doctor puts that, that hypothetical situation of him having the disease that would kill all living life. Would you do it? And seeing that unfold and Davros's logical conclusion of yes, I would, to have that kind of control over life and death. And you start to learn just how nuts this guy is and all the things that's probably happened to him to make him this way. It's phenomenally good. They have so many good conversations in this. Sarah is really good in this. She really gets to shine a bit because when her and the Doctor get separated, I really enjoy her kind of befriending the other people, the kind of mutant people running around. I don't know if I really call them the Thals or not, but to see them running around and her trying to survive. Oh yeah, that's right, Harry's with the Doctor. I had to actually remember where Harry was for a second. Some people would argue the Daleks themselves aren't really in the story much. It's more a Davros story, less a Dalek story. But it's the threat of the Daleks are just looming over this whole story. This story really is a Dalek story because it's the threat of the Daleks, the Phantom Menace of them, as if you will. That's the wrong franchise, but they're looming over this story. You can see their shadow. You can see them just hovering over the whole story because we know that the Doctor is not going to prevent their creation. You know, he's sent back in time to stop them because the Time Lords know they're going to be a threat one day, a great threat, even to the Time Lords themselves, which, as we know, actually does play out like that. But we know that's not going to happen. We know the Doctor is not going to succeed in stopping them, so it's seeing the threat grow, seeing everything fall into place kind of the way we know it has to, knowing where everything's going to go wrong. Because we know from the original story, the Daleks, that we have to get to there. Somehow, everything that ends in Genesis has to end up there. We just don't know how it gets there. And watching all that unfold is phenomenally good. I love the acting here, and just seeing, you know, how far both sides are willing to go in this centuries-long war, and just the extremes they'll go to. It's really, really interesting to watch. I know also some people complain perhaps that Genesis is a tad too long. It drags a little in the middle. I personally disagree with that. I think Genesis is a perfect six-parter. I don't find any filler in there. However, if you are one of those people who thinks it drags a little in the middle, it has an omnibus version. I've actually seen it. I went, when they released the season 12 box set, I went and saw a showing they did in theater of it, and it was the omnibus version, which is really nice to see Genesis of the Daleks on a big screen. So, you know, if you have an issue with it being too long, watch the omnibus version. It is actually on the season 12 box set. Perhaps you might like that more. Not only that, I do like, was it Nigel, was his name? Davros's right-hand man. I really like him. I mean, he's totally dedicated to the cause. I mean, yeah, there's definitely some, you know, World War II German-style stuff going on in there. YouTube doesn't like me to say that word. I mean, it's very obvious what the Daleks are modeled after and what the Khalids are modeled after, what real-life counterparts are modeled after. But the fact that Niter, has, you know, that fervent, forget the word I'm looking for, that he's that dedicated, he's that loyal, that no matter what happens, he follows Davros. Davros really does kind of have a cult of personality going on with a few people, but especially Niter. So, and I think the guy who plays Niter, who I believe passed away not long ago, actually does a really good job of that. He's actually in several episodes of Classic Who. I really like him. But just the fervent loyalty shown there is really good. But I love that Davros has the Dalek voice when he talks. And I love how he screams like the Daleks. I mean, there really is a lot of Davros in the Daleks. We see not just physically, but mentally. Getting into that, his chair looks a lot like a Dalek chair. You almost think he's half Dalek. So it's interesting that so much of him, you know, meeting Davros really does kind of give you an explanation of why the Daleks are the way they are. Because they're a lot like their father, much like how parents pass on, you know, their character traits to their offspring. It's kind of the same way with him. It's kind of like there is an episode of the original Star Trek. The Ultimate Computer, maybe? The Ultimate Foe? It's the one where the Enterprise has the computer AI put in it. And the guy who created it, Dr. Daystrom, is supervising while they're testing it, doing exercises. But during the story, the computer kind of goes haywire, takes over the ship, starts really attacking the other ships, and actually destroys the Excalibur. And while they're trying to figure out why, you find out as the episode progresses, Daystrom becomes more and more unhinged. While he is a genius, he kind of has a nervous breakdown and becomes unhinged right at the end. But the computer is based off his brain patterns, so naturally the computer is erratic as well. Similar to what's going on here. In a way, the Daleks are so much based off of Davros because of his ego that they have the same kind of flaws their dad has. They think of themselves first, which is how he programmed them. He took out their emotions. They are supposed to want to destroy all other life besides Daleks. And that's exactly what they like to do. There is a lot of Davros in the Daleks, and I really like that meeting Davros gives you a better understanding of why the Daleks are the way they are. So I think that even though the Daleks physically aren't in the story much, though I do love at the end when they're running around destroying everybody, the threat of the Daleks looms over the story very, very large. I think some great performances. I think the guest actors do a good job. Though I do always notice the one soldier who also plays in LOLO as Gruber. I absolutely love LOLO, so when I see him, I'm just I'm always thinking that's Gruber in the back of my mind. He's also in an episode of Babylon 5, too. But I think everyone does a good job. I really like the one doctor who's like, Davros has already concluded aliens don't exist on another planet. And then he looks at the chart and sees the doctor's not from their race. And he looks up and Tom's just like, and that bit about no tea, we'd like some tea. Or that bit about no tea, and he's like, no tea, Harry. There are some nice humorous bits in this story. But it does deal with very important things. Doctor Who very much is a lens for real life problems and dark roads that could be taken if we're not careful. Of course, the Doctor's speech in this is amazing. His "Do I Have the Right" speech. We all know this one. It's a very important speech. I think a lot of people actually forget one of the key points of that speech is that, you know, people think, well, the fourth Doctor wouldn't do that kind of stuff like the seventh Doctor, and they point to this speech. But you have to remember, the Doctor doesn't actually make his decision. He gets interrupted by the other guy telling him, hey, you know, we've stopped Davros. We've got him to agree to stop. So he doesn't have to make that choice. He even mentions in that speech, you know, I'm grateful to you, Garmin. More grateful than you'll ever know. So he actually doesn't decide. He's right in the middle of trying to decide when he gets interrupted. It's still a beautiful speech. It's one of my favorite speeches. It's one of my favorite Fourth Doctor moments. It's a very character-building moment for the Doctor. But he doesn't actually decide not to. He's still grappling with it when Garmin shows up. So that is an important thing to note, to point out. I also love the Daleks' speech at the end about we will prepare, we will go stronger, we will take our place. Because that's really setting everything up for the Daleks later, as everything's kind of getting where we know it has to be. Much like how the prequels in Star Wars, we knew have to end up at Episode 4, Genesis has to end up at the Daleks. But I do think it really is a tour de force, this story. It is essential. So what do you think? Has any of this kind of made any sense to you? I've just been kind of rambling a bit. But I absolutely love Genesis of the Daleks. I think just objectively it's one of the best Tom Baker stories. Objectively, it's one of the best Doctor Who stories. And I definitely think it's essential viewing if you're a Doctor Who fan. So let me know what you think of Genesis of the Daleks and what you think of this video and if the stuff I've said about it. Other things to do, click the like button, click the subscribe button, click the bell for notifications. I do want to give a shout out to a new patron that just joined, Fraser Smith. Just joined. Very glad to have you on. I really appreciate that. I noticed you've also been down in the comments lately. I've been enjoying interacting with you there. I always love having new people on the channel. So that did make my day. Anytime I get a new subscriber or a new patron, it always makes my day. I'm always grateful for the fact people enjoy watching what I do. There are 2 polls up right now on my Patreon, one of which is open to the public. That will be running probably through around July the 10th, maybe a little later, we'll see. That is to vote on which Doctor I will be doing a review of. That Doctor, his companions, some stories, his era. Big review. And it's all classic Doctors, 1st through 8th. So anyone is able to vote on that. So if you like my channel and want to help steer the direction of it, go ahead and head over to my Patreon. Again, a link down in the description to that. There is also a poll open just for my patrons for any tier level, even the entry level $2 tier level, gets you access to this poll, and that is to vote on which 5th Doctor companion I will be reviewing, so check that out as well. Most importantly, stay safe out there, and thank you for watching.